All right, good evening, everybody. A meeting of the Substandard Living Conditions Special Committee. We're just calling this to order at 7 p.m. for July 12th, 2018. If the clerk would like to call a roll.
Certainly. Alderman Lopez, Chairman.
Here.
Alderman Jettie.
Here.
Alderman at Large Brendan Laws.
Here.
Alderman Jan Schmidt, I'm here. And Alderwoman Linda Harriet Gathright is not here as yet.
Before the meeting, Alderman Harriet Gathright had stated she could not attend herself. She does intend to call in. Also in attendance, we have Director Sarah Marchant from Community Development, as well as some members of her staff. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Absolutely, thank you. Kyle Metcalf, Code Enforcement.
Good evening.
And Bill McKinney, Building Safety Manager, is with me tonight.
And we also have Corporation Counsel Attorney Steve Bolton. So our discussion, it looks like there's no members of the public present for public comment. Our discussion for our agenda tonight is a discussion of substandard living conditions and the role that the city departments have. We had discussed in our previous meeting that substandard living conditions typically have multiple sides to them: the experience of the tenants and the rights that they have to quality of living, but that also the ability of the owners, the landlords, to reasonably provide for those needs. And so we wanted to go around and discuss different city services and resources and roles so that it was kind of clear as to the public's perception what the city could do, what the city couldn't do, and the services that were offered. We're hoping that the city can be viewed as a resource for landlords who may have trouble meeting the needs of their tenants and may have perhaps an escalating number of complaints or situations that they find themselves unable to immediately handle. So Director Marchant for Community Development, I guess we can just open this up as a general discussion if you'd like to introduce your department and what it does.
Sure, thank you. So Sarah Marchant, Community Development Division Director. The division incorporates a bunch of departments, but for the purposes of tonight, we have Code Enforcement and Building Safety with us. And we have just a couple slides for each of them to go over an overview of what services they provide specific to this area, and then we can have further discussion if that's okay with you. So I'm going to start with Building Safety. And actually, you can click yourself. Yep. Just click, I think.
Yep. So, thank you, Chairman Lopez and members of the committee. I'm Bill McKinney. I'm the manager for the Department of Building Safety and also the code official for the City of Nashua. The authority granted to the Department of Building Safety is essentially through RSA 155A and specifically Chapter 155A2 of the State Building Code, which grants us the authority to enforce all the codes that are recognized under the International Building Code, International Residential Codes, and several of the other of that family of codes. We also receive our authority through National Revised Ordinance Chapter 105, which governs our building codes in the City of Nashua. So it's often asked, what do we do? What does our department really do? Many people think we just go out and look for people that might be, doing work without permits and, hunting them down. But that's really not, that's a small part of what our department does. Our department is really important with keeping official records pertaining to all construction within the city. We also maintain all records for permits that have been issued in the city. We track those permits to make sure that, work is progressing. We track all fees that are collected for those permits, inspections that are done, any notices that we may issue as far as violations or corrections, or any orders that are issued, which could be a stop work order or an order to correct a deficiency. We maintain valuable documentation as far as when any questions arise during or during construction of the project. So we provide assistance to designers and builders, which are typically your architects and engineers and the contractors for those projects, when they have questions that arise pertaining to a specific aspect in the codes. Many times we have to render an interpretation of how that code is going to affect their project. So our inspectors, as well as I, have to keep educated with the ever-evolving construction industry. Daily, new materials are created, new methods are created that we have to become educated on in order to educate the contractors and the homeowners when they're trying to do their projects. So we keep up to date with the ever-changing laws and regulations, both at the state level, the federal level, and also with the city when they change ordinances as well. We verify projects will comply with code before and during construction. We find it's extremely important that we verify that those buildings being designed and proposed are going to comply before they start building that building. It's much easier and far cheaper to change it on paper than it is out in the field. We issue all the permits for all aspects of construction. We conduct the inspections for all those permits that are issued, and we help to prevent or limit the effects from man-made or natural disasters. If buildings are built properly and to code, there's less of a chance of those buildings being severely damaged during an event. So permits that we issue are building permits, which cover all new construction, alterations, renovations. Electrical permits, which is any type of electrical system that's out there, including solar, wind, and we're now starting to see some of the new battery storage systems. Mechanical systems, which could be as simple as your home heating system to as complicated as a industrial ventilation equipment or a kitchen hood system. We also do gas piping inspections to make sure that they comply with code and that we're not going to have any disasters for faulty installation. Plumbing and demolition, both interior demolition and demolition as far as fully removing buildings. As far as our inspections, depending upon the level of work that's going to be done, we could start inspections out at the foundation. We move then into what we call rough inspections, which covers all of your electrical, your plumbing, your mechanical systems, everything that's pretty much hidden behind the walls and in the ceilings after the project is done. We do frame inspections, which also include what we call frame and draft stopping. Frame and draft stopping is an important component of construction now that helps to compartmentize. It limits the spread of fire and smoke. Insulation inspections for compliance with the energy code. And then we also conduct final inspections, which involve all of your building, electrical, mechanical, and plumbing systems, as well as limited areas of the site work around the building. But there's limitations to what we have the authority to do. In most cases, our agency has no authority if there's not a permit in effect. So if people call with a complaint, for us, we have to investigate to determine whether we have any authority to be on the property or not. Many times we would have to work hand in hand with code enforcement, the fire marshal's office, or the Department of Health for many violations. Our authority is limited to new buildings, additions, alterations, or renovations, or any of the replacement of mechanical, plumbing, or electrical systems. We also may be able to investigate violations of any building construction code adopted by city ordinance if we can physically see that violation from the public right-of-way, or if we are granted a administrative search warrant to access the property. Other than that, we actually work hand in hand, as I said before, with code enforcement, fire marshal's office, or health. And that is the Reader's Digest version of what we do. Certainly.
So I think it's fair to say you're a resource for people developing or building properties?
Absolutely, absolutely. We are here to answer questions as they're trying to work through their ideas on what they want to build or construct. And again, if they're not sure how to do it, we're also a resource for them as well.
I guess I was curious about what constitutes a renovation or like a modification. Like if somebody moves out of an apartment and the landlord does new sheetrock, redoes plumbing, updates a bathroom or something, is that something you'd be looking at?
Yep. Yes.
How would you know
If
it's
they're
happening?
updating any plumbing system or electrical system, we get involved in that. If they're renovating an apartment as far as, moving it right back to skeleton, then yes, we get involved in that as far as we're going to look at draft stopping, we're going to look at insulation and upgrading of electrical and plumbing systems. But if it's simply removing carpets, changing out cabinets, painting, that does not involve us.
Are there any other questions from the committee before we move on? Oh, Alderman Jettie?
I think I heard you say that you have no jurisdiction unless there's a permit. So if somebody is doing work without a permit, there's nothing you can do about that?
No, we do, because that would be a violation of city ordinance. But the way the laws are written is if we need to either physically see the violation from the public right of way to have access to the property, or be allowed on the property by the property owner, or if not allowed on the property by the property owner, in order to investigate, we could obtain an administrative search warrant. So there are ways for us to investigate that work that's being done without permits and take the necessary action. But again, there's several steps that we would have to go through in many cases in order to, so that we're not violating people's rights.
If I could follow up.
Yes.
So if somebody sees their next door neighbor doing major work on their property and suspect that there's no permit or don't see a permit, can they call you and can you do anything?
Absolutely. Yep. If they call us and we can physically see the work going on, that's enough of a reason to ask to enter the property. That property owner does have the right to deny us entry, but we would at that point there have enough evidence to go to the court and obtain a search warrant and take the necessary actions. Our normal course of action is we work with them to obtain the permits, and hopefully they work very well with us.
Our goal is, Our goal is compliance.
Right.
I say this several times a day. Our goal is compliance with the codes and with the housing code. And so we want to work with people to meet, to come into compliance. That's our goal. And also just on that point, there is a very active GIS map on our website that you can go to. And if you are nervous that your neighbors are doing work without permits, you can go to this map and you can look up the address and you can click on it. It's updated every night and you'll see if there are any permits active on that property or what permits have been pulled on it. So that is a nice resource if you are nervous about a neighbor or something that's going on without permits. Yes.
So I know particularly from, I just raised my hand for myself. I know particularly from my own experience, looking at renovations that might be happening, a sign that a contractor might be at work is like a dumpster outside, large amounts of debris. I'm thinking particularly as our role in Substandard Living Conditions Committee, there may be modifications or changes being made without you being aware of it, that tenants might see happening, and that's where it might be important to make a comment and make sure that it is being done to code. One of the materials that was given to us for this meeting that we're going to attach to the agenda is the Code Enforcement Self-Inspection Guide.
Mhm.
That might also be something that people could look at to confirm that their apartment has the features that it's expected to have. Is that fair?
Yes, and that's a perfect segue into Kyle Metcalf, the code enforcement officer, to talk about what they do.
All right, please proceed.
Hi, I'm Kyle Metcalf. I work for the City of Nashville Code Enforcement Department. We have a manager, Nelson Ortega. Rob Sousa is another code officer, and another Frank Borelli. He's not up there now. He's a newer code officer, so we'll have to add him to that, and we have an administrative assistant. So just to dovetail into what you said, Alderman Lopez, about that, on our housing inspections that we do collaborate with the building department, the fire marshal's office, and the health department, and we've when we're going through the building, it's sometimes easily recognizable to see somebody has done major alterations or renovations or repairs. And I'll just give you an example. We find a lot of times water heaters. There's a specific New Hampshire statute that you have to be a licensed gas fitter, show a copy of your license to the building department upon application of your permit. So a lot of times what we'll do is we have the resources to check to see if a permit was pulled because we're able to narrow it down what the date of the installation of the water heater was. So that was a problem for a while. We were very proactive about holding people accountable for that and actually having them criminally prosecuted because of the danger of somebody that doesn't know what they're doing. They're not a licensed gas fitter by the statute, and that we're putting their tenants at risk by installing a gas-fired appliance without license to do so. So that's just an example of the collaboration. We see things on the inspections that we know is new construction or things have been added, things haven't been there. And there's various ways that we catch that. Sometimes assessing will go out and look at a property, and in, say, 2014, there was no deck there. In 2016, there's a very large deck there. We look through our archived records, we see there wasn't a building permit pulled, so we contact the property owner. I'm just giving you an example of, we see that you added a deck. Unfortunately, you missed a part of the process of getting that building permit and made sure that it was inspected and it was to current code, so the deck doesn't collapse, that type of thing. So we're trying to avoid that shoddy construction, somebody that's out there advertising, say on Craigslist, it's not a licensed plumber, electrician, that sort of thing. So a lot of times on the inspections, because we are able to come together and collaborate, we're catching a lot of this on rental properties. Absolutely. So just go to the housing code complaints. How we get complaints is we have a housing complaint form that a tenant can fill out. If it's a immediate life safety issue that has to be addressed, that's immediate. And we say somebody doesn't have running water, they don't have electricity, their gas has been shut off because there's some sort of repair that needs to be made to the gas line. That can circumvent this housing complaint code, depending on the severity of what the complaint is and what's going on at the property. This is for what we call sometimes nuisance abatements. A tenant will call and maybe they have a pest infestation. They may have windows that don't open properly or don't fit in the sash properly. They may not have insect screens, which are required by our ordinance from May 15th to October 15th. So this is a form that we use. They can put down things that they're alleging that need to be repaired in the apartment. What we do historically is we'll give that property owner a courtesy call and say, listen, I'm not sure you're aware of this, because they're supposed to get a copy of this form. So in other words, the tenant fills it out, they give code enforcement a copy, they retain a copy for their records, and then they're supposed to share that with the property owner, because they're ultimately responsible for the repair or what the tenant brings to their attention. That's their responsibility to fix it. So we're intervening to the point of alerting the property owner there's a problem at the property, the tenant's brought it to the city's attention. It doesn't necessarily mean we're getting involved at that point, because the whole spirit and intent of the ordinance was to have the property owner and the tenants work collaboratively together to solve the problem. So we've had great success since we've implemented this form. Get the two parties talking, get the repairs done, and then we'll go and inspect it and ensure that it's been done. A lot of times, the tenant will call us and the owner and say that it's mutually agreed upon that the problem that they brought forward to the city has been, remedied. So there's no further follow-up necessary for us. We have a City View program where we document all our cases, all the complainant information's in there, the property owner information in there, and then it gives us the ability to give a synopsis of what we did, what the tenant said, what the landlord or property owner said about the issue. So we have the complaint form, and then you get, you're going fast.
Sorry.
That's all right. So there's multiple ways that you can contact the City and National Code Department or the Building Department. We have an email complaint form, which people can send in. Telephonically, people can call us. All our contact information is on the city's website.
Even this ancient telephone?
Yeah. Which was very nice. We just got brand new, beautiful telephones. So we're very, it's very helpful. So there's a variety of ways for constituents, property owners, interested parties to contact the Code Enforcement Department. I mean, we don't want to be a secret. We want to be out there, and to give folks in the community a sense of there's somebody that can help me with my problem, whether it's a landlord, whether it's a tenant, an interested party. So we believe that, we've gotten that message out there, and we're continuing to find other ways to get that mass media format out there so people know, what we do and what services we provide and what a resource we can be for everyone within the city. So the inspection enforcement, I may have kind of hit on this, but if we have a non-compliance situation, if the NRO says we have to give one written notice, if, say, within the 14 days the problem isn't rectified, and we can do a notice of violation for a housing complaint. You send that, you may have had discussions with the property owner. It could be just a situation where, you know, they're just not willing to fix it. They disagree with us. We don't think this is a violation, even though it's clear, black and white, it's a code violation. Occasionally, you're gonna run into people that just, I'm not gonna do it. So, one notice of violation, we have a ticketing system. So if that repair wasn't made, or it could be a zoning or a planning or housing code type situation, we have the ability now, it's similar to a traffic ticket, where we can issue that property owner a ticket, and it's a graduated fine system. So you get a first fine where you get a date to remedy this. Then if it's still not done, second fine with a remedy, with a date certain to fix it. And then third fine, monetary fine. And then if it's still that to no avail, we've exhausted all our options with the ticketing system, then I would go to Attorney Bolton and say, this is the situation, I'm gonna serve a criminal summons to the owner of the property, and then we'll get a arraignment date from the court, and then we will actually have Corporation Counsel prosecute this person for failure to take the corrective action they were supposed to. So that's something in our toolbox that we use.
So to just give an example, the most frequent complaint I hear from people in lower income housing is bed bug treatments, and that was classified earlier as a nuisance. Does that trigger this ticket process?
Bed bugs are handled by the state of New Hampshire elected to change the bed bug. We still we'll take the complaint.
Mhm.
We'll go ahead and record that address. We'll get the complainant's information. That's a referral to circuit court now. So in other words, the city, we will, like I said, we record the information, we'll get where the property is and everything. Explain what the statute is. There's certain guidelines a property owner has to follow by the statute. If they're not, now this is, you know, once again, it's an allegation, but if a tenant alleges there's no such treatment going on, I'm getting no relief whatsoever, they haven't adhered to the, 48 hours, 72 hours, 7 days. There's certain date certains that the landlord is supposed to follow. Then we recommend they file what's called a 548 petition at the circuit court. What that triggers is a hearing in front of a judge where he brings the property owner in, he brings the complainant, the plaintiff, the tenant in, and then they go in front of the judge and they plead their case as far as the bed bug treatment goes. It was such a epidemic for a while, and it's still a problem, but the courts decided to take it out of the municipality's hands and let the courts handle that particular situation.
Are there protections? I guess this question might be for Attorney Bolton, for tenants who are raising that complaint? Or, I mean, is a landlord free to just evict them?
There's a retaliatory complaint statute that protects a tenant for retaliation of, say, an eviction or a rent increase just because of a code complaint. Absolutely, they're protected. Steve, I'm sorry, but
No,
Does that
absolutely
extend
correct.
to, I mean, so there's different forms of tenant. There's tenant on a lease, there's.
Tenant will.
Yeah,
Yeah.
month to month. Are
Right.
you considered a tenant if you've paid your rent and can expect to be staying there until your rent is not, until you've used it?
Yes.
Okay, so someone staying rent month to month can put a complaint in here and have a reasonable expectation of protection against retaliation.
Yes.
Okay, I just thought that was important because we were talking about this process, and I'm imagining how people would engage in it. And I know when it's your place to live and you're miserable in it, it still may be better than nothing. So
Yeah, you still have a roof over your head. So, I mean, people live with code problems.
even if there's a leak in it and you have to stand on this side of the room,
Right.
you're still, at least you're not nowhere.
Correct. You're not home, it's better than being homeless. So, but those are, it's all about, and I think Director Marchant says it, you want the buy-in of the voluntary compliance where it doesn't have to come to that point where you're ticketing and so forth, but it is a resource that unfortunately we have to use sometimes because there's an unwillingness to make the repair.
Not to interrupt your presentation, I want to let you get
Sure.
back to it, but I'm just curious, does this process trigger any additional resources or ability for somebody to qualify? I guess that might be for Director Marchant, maybe? Are there any programs that will help a landlord get out of this situation if they're getting nailed with, concerns, but they may not have the resource or have a way to demonstrate an inability to immediately address?
So we work towards compliance, like I said. Code has the flexibility to give timeframes for people to correct actions that are reasonable and based on reasonable situations. So, if there's an issue with a roof and they need to get contractors and they need to get the funding together, we're not going to give them 14 days to fix it. We have the flexibility to set reasonable timelines and deadlines, but if we don't see progress, that's when we're going to run into problems and we're going to use some of the other tools in our toolbox. As far as resources for landlords, we do through urban programs. If tenants qualify, depending on if they're owner occupied or if there's low income tenants, sometimes there's the housing improvements program through urban programs. It doesn't have a ton of money in it, but that is a program we can use to say, repair something specific or emergency heating repair or emergency water heater repair. Sometimes we have a bathroom that's not ADA compliant and we suddenly have a very low income homeowner who can't make their bathroom ADA compliant, right? And so then we could talk to urban programs, which also falls under community development, Carrie Skina, who has those funds. I think there's only about 50,000 budgeted this year, which doesn't go very far when you have a couple of improvements, but it is a resource. And so we're absolutely happy to talk to people, and Code is very good at referring people to both the housing improvement program and also Carrie has a very significant grant for lead abatement and remediation. And so we work with health, who's out in the field, code enforcement, and fire marshals if we see potential lead paint issues or any lead remediation that's needed, you can refer people to Carrie and her team at Urban Programs to get grant funding to help reduce the costs of the lead remediation.
Okay, I think I should probably let you continue. Unless there's any other questions along those lines. Is it? No. Alderman Lowe? Okay. Okay, continue, please.
So there is some tenant responsibilities in the NROs also, so they're required to keep their apartment up to sanitary standards set forth by the city. It would simply keep the apartment free of accumulation of trash and junk, overcrowding, and allowing the infestation of pests. That statute now is really covered under the state because it's a little bit complicated because a landlord can, if they can prove it, say that, Mr. Smith brought the bed bugs in. I'm still required to pay for the remediation of the pest control, but they can go and seek civil damages against the tenant for the cost of the treatment. So they put that in the statute, which I don't really know if there's a lot of owners that have gone after the tenants for some sort of reimbursement for the pest control.
I think it'd be a little fascinating to find an example of somebody who let someone in who has bed bugs and
Well,
then says, "Oh, well, you brought them in."
That's why we keep a history of it, because the statute says so I move into a place and I'm there for a couple months and next thing you know, I see activity of bed bugs. So the statute said, well, if you can go back 6 months and you had activity, then it's definitely on you, the property owner, because we have a record that within that 6 months you had previous complaints prior to the new tenant moving in.
So if someone were accused of bringing bed bugs in, they could potentially talk to code enforcement and check to see.
People call us all the time for that. Could you please check my apartment at such and such? We've had, unfortunately, at a time, it's gotten better, it's diminishing, but there were unfortunately a lot of buildings throughout the city that had some bed bug problems, yes. But it's getting better.
Well, I think it would be a good point to note that the city's response to infestations in largely occupied buildings can impact the larger community too.
Sure.
So the public in general shouldn't be cheering the city on for closing any major buildings, because where are those people going to go while it's being treated, and what are they going to bring with them? So it's important for there to be a measured response.
presents some challenges, as you just said. There's, the tenants need to be relocated, they need to be out of the apartment, and a lot of people are reluctant to move because their possessions they're being treated, their furniture, their bedding and everything, because it gets extremely expensive to replace everything that you own in an apartment. So in our opinion, what we've seen is it's better to treat that unit and do it professionally with a professional pest control company and try to eradicate the pests. And there's a whole formula for this. It's not, you want to get the units next to it, up and down and the whole thing, so they don't spread out from the one unit that may have an infestation. So,
I'm sure you have resources for newer
sure.
owners to be like, all right, I don't know what to do with this. What do I do?
Absolutely. Yeah, we do. We're unfortunately, I'm very well versed in this. So we can give a lot of information to folks that are experiencing that type of, situation. So,
So could I ask?
I just want to take the gross one off the screen. Sorry.
Should someone say that, yes, indeed, they do have bed bugs in their apartment? They call you and you record the address. What's the next step that they need to do?
well, a lot of times they're saying that the treatment isn't effective. So once again, it would be up to if they elect to file that 548 petition. But we explained the date certain thresholds. That's the onus is on the owner to take care of. And if they're treating them, then I mean, I don't give legal advice, obviously, but that's why it's good to provide a copy of what the RSA says. So we will mail that out to the person that's affected by this particular issue, so they can see it firsthand. Okay, sometimes people want gratification that unfortunately just not going to get, because it's a process. They're a very tenacious insect, and they're very hard to get rid of. And you really have to do your due diligence as far as the owner working with his pest control company to do the treatments to get rid of these things. It's more I think the spirit or intent of the petition was somebody that's totally disregarding their responsibility to eradicate the pest. They're not doing anything. And that's a person that needs to go over to the circuit court and file that petition. That's really what that 548 petition is for. The person ignoring the problem and not doing anything.
And the ordinance does kind of stipulate time frame for response and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the RSA, the statute does. Yes, it does.
I mean, I think that would be helpful for the public to know so they can figure out how to pick their battles, to be honest.
We've done a lot of bed bug education throughout the city. So, because this kind of took us by storm, say around 2007, 2008. So we have brochures, the health department has brochures, first responders, we've done training with them. The solid waste folks that have to pick up the bedding, there's certain things they need to know to protect themselves. You don't want to bring these things home to your own property, your own house. So, yeah, I think, we've done an admirable job of getting information out there to the folks that have this particular issue they're dealing with.
Can you give us a general sense, like the first responders can give us an idea of how many complaints per building, like the highest repeat offenders? Do you have that kind of information about code violations?
Oh, we can probably glean that information, sure.
Yeah, Sarah Marchand, Community Development.
Director Marchand.
We have the current system that we're using for all of our permitting and inspections and code enforcement system. We can certainly do printouts of where we go most frequently, where we inspect. Some are deliberate. We have a process of every 2 years, a very deliberate process of inspecting all the boarding houses for compliance. And so we're in the process of doing that right now. And we do that as a team. Code enforcement initiates it, and we do it with a team with fire, health, building, and police. And so we go through all the major boarding houses in the city every 2 years for compliance. And it's, we do an inspection, and then there's a letter of the list of things that both tenants and landlords need to fix. And then we go back and re-inspect. And sometimes we go back and re-inspect and we add a little more on. But it is a good process for getting everybody back into compliance and making sure that we have safe compatible housing for the boarding houses. That is not the case for the smaller multifamilies. I think when I was pulling data recently, of all of our multifamily housing, I think the biggest number of units is actually in 3 and 4 unit buildings. And so those we would only go into if we get complaints or if somebody's pulling permits. So we don't inspect those as proactively.
From a budgetary perspective, it sounds like you're saying that it's a huge process, at least with the boarding houses, but the larger apartment complexes, I assume, get regular inspections as well?
No.
No, okay.
Nope.
I guess that's surprising because you'd think with having that many people cohabitating the same structure, there's more risk of injury to each other or one problem becoming someone else's problem.
We don't, unless there's a complaint or a permit's being pulled. That is not the case. We have a manager and 3 officers, one of which is grant funded,
Okay.
and a very part-time administrative assistant. So we are largely a complaint-based department, as I think I say every budget season. We don't have the staff to really be very proactive, but we are proactive with boarding houses, but none of the other large multifamilies do we inspect regularly.
Is there anything that the board could do, or do you sense the need to do? Because I don't want to just create new rules or funding sources, but if you felt that your department could better address the needs in the community, is there any strategies such as all of the new buildings that are being built to new housing opportunities, or approaching larger scale concentrations of habitation and applying a specific fee or permit or cost to better fund more inspections and more regular monitoring?
I don't know that that's necessary at this time. I do think that we're in a housing crisis, and just that we are way short of the number of housing units that we have. We've been underbuilding housing for several years, and it is absolutely reflected in our increased rents. Rents in Nashua have risen almost 20% in 3 years from the data that I've been looking at, and that's astronomical. Nobody's pay is rising like that. And so I do think, and I use the words housing crisis not very lightly, I do think that we are at a place where we need to build more housing, and we're working internally very hard to look at some of our ordinances and how can we, and what do we have available? Is it just marketing what we can do already? Because the more I dig, we're actually very flexible and allow for a lot of different things. But it's marketing ourselves better. It's working with developers. It's working with people who might not have been thinking about housing in certain areas of the city and looking at building more housing. I think that's a large part of our problem right now, because rents are soaring, and in a large part it's due to lack of supply. We have quite a few coming on. I think we have 500 units that have started to come online and will be online in the next couple months probably. It's nowhere near enough, and the variety of housing is needed as well. As far as what we can do, I think that the ticketing tool has been remarkably effective. I think we've done very well with that, and I think a lot of us have used that. I'm not sure that there's something else specifically. I think,
And I don't want to disincentivize any development, especially
Yeah.
in the middle of a housing crisis. And particularly chairing this committee, I'm conscious, because of my own experience in the ward I represent, that upsetting the apple cart at a bad time is going to negatively impact a lot of people who don't have a lot of resources. But I was very interested in this the apartment self-inspection guide, and you mentioned a ticketing tool. The Department of Public Works has the GOV, My Civics app, where you can, individual civilians can tag a pothole that they see, or a light that's not working, or that kind of thing. Is there anything similar that we could be looking at as a city where people can self-report? Maybe landlords themselves could voluntarily conduct these as part of their assessment and send it in, or something like that?
So if anybody calls, much to chagrin sometimes, if anybody calls and wants us to come out and check something out, we do that free of charge at any time. And we're more than happy to proactively go look at anything. If you're a landlord and you're turning over an apartment and you want somebody to come out and just walk through it and make sure that everything looks good, we absolutely do that for free at any time. And we're happy to provide that kind of information if it's possible. We have it all on our website too. But yes, we're absolutely happy to be proactive. Code is regularly attends all the neighborhood watch meetings to kind of, and they do education there, and we try to be in a lot of the neighborhoods as well. But yeah, I don't know if there's things other than that that could be useful. We'd definitely be open to discussing them.
Just one last question, I guess, for me. Regarding the complaints, I guess, authority, can a third party make a complaint on behalf of an adult? For example, a case management organization or, you know.
We get Greater National Mental Health will call us, Harbor Homes calls, National Housing Authority will call us and seek sometimes technical assistance or bring something to our attention. So yes, yes,
But I
they
was
can.
thinking more with regards to the state,
Oh,
that process. Can somebody advocate for somebody?
Yes.
yeah, we work with Department of Children and Family Services. They've called us, with, say, concerns or can we look at this building? We don't think, I'm just giving an example.
Yeah.
The conditions aren't, don't appear very good or there's missing smoke detectors, things like that. So, yes.
Okay, that's good to know because I think a lot of people, again, might be a little bit intimidated by the prospect of even raising it. From the discussion and presentation we've had here, my impression is that the city is very much in a working relationship with landlords, and so tenants shouldn't be terrified that their whole building is going to be shut down and everyone will be, shuttered. It's more like, okay, well, here's some guidance, here's some best practices, here's a list of places that you might not know exist and resources. So I wanted to make it, clear to the public that if you have concerns about your living conditions, there is a process that you can use and reach out to. There are protections in place. And then likewise for landlords, there's responsibilities that the tenants have to live up to. The city isn't going to use only one tool in the toolbox, the hammer. And sometimes it's going to be a little bit more supportive.
Right.
So are there any other questions from the committee?
I have a question. The current housing code, section 18229, paragraph L and M talk about rodent and insect protection and
Right.
section M says,
It's on page 22.
Section M says that when an infestation is limited to a single dwelling unit, responsibility under this section lies with the occupant thereof. When an infestation occurs in more than one dwelling unit of a structure or in the common areas of a structure, responsibility under this section shall lie with the owner. Now, did I understand you to say that there's a state statute that has superseded this?
Yes.
Okay. So would it,
On specifically one pest, bed bugs. So a mouse complaint, cockroaches, ants, we get bats, we get squirrel complaints. That would be something that under our ordinance, under this. So this was written prior to the statute from the state. The state adopted the RSA for the bed bugs 3 years ago. So that just, all the language deals with no other infestation except bed bugs. So we can still remedy situations of the like, but with a different pest.
okay, so
Yeah.
other than bed bugs, these provisions still apply?
Yes, yes.
And so,
I would say even bed bugs, they still apply, but there's a more specific state statute that provides for a faster remedy. And the tenants who find themselves in that situation are advised and well advised to take advantage of the 540A program. They'll get into court very quickly. The landlord will be ordered by the court to remedy the situation. If it is the tenant's, if it is due to the action of the tenants that only that tenant's unit is infested with the bed bugs and the building has been free from infestation in the 6 months prior, the court will basically allow the landlord to add the cost of the remedy to the tenant. And if the tenant doesn't pay it, he or she is subject to eviction. But the landlord has to remedy it and remedy it within a specific time frame. So that works better and faster than something that we could do.
Okay. But the tenant, if the bed bugs are only in the tenant's dwelling unit, the tenant could be facing the paying for the
Correct.
treatment.
Any other questions?
Have you finished your presentation?
Yes, I'm done. I'll take any other additional questions if you have some, sir.
Okay. I do have another question.
Sure.
So, other than the housing code, does your code enforcement office enforce any other codes?
Would you, the Nashua Land Use Code, so that covers the zoning, planning. We, we get a lot of referrals from different departments sometimes to look into certain things, you know, sign complaints, we do those also. So we, a variety of codes that we enforce and investigate, sure. Did you have something in particular that you had a question about?
I do, but it's not the subject of this committee, so.
Okay.
Bed buggy mattresses on the sidewalk?
Well, with, if discharged furniture, we do have a, you know, if you'd like, I can answer that question. So we always try to, the onus is, in my opinion, on the property owner. So if your tenants have discharged furniture out on the sidewalk, it's your responsibility to remove them. It shouldn't be on the city. If it's abandoned, and we have a lot of that, certain areas, unfortunately, we get people that will abandon mattresses, furniture, et cetera. We will call that into solid waste. They're very responsive. We give them where the particular items are that need to be picked up, and they will pick them up for us. We have an excellent relationship with the folks at Solid Waste. They're very helpful.
I definitely want to second that because I generally, when I'm walking in the community, when I spot things on the side that have been left there, I am on it with them, and they're usually gone within 24 hours.
Right, and we, unfortunately, we have some particular areas around the city seem to be more susceptible to that illegal dumping. And so we do, Director Marchant did give us some additional resources to address some of those things. And we're working with Nashua PD also on that because it is a crime, so.
Someone's got to get rid of it. You can't just leave your
Just, you know, get the
furniture, or
permit,
mattresses,
bring it
or
to the
washing
landfill
machine
would
wherever
be
you
the
want.
easiest thing and the
Yeah.
right thing to do, not leave it on the city street to blight our city, so.
It is pretty challenging when you're trying to do a big community service cleanup and there's like a washing machine in the woods and you're like, well, this didn't just show up here.
Right.
Like, someone
Yeah.
had a plan.
What tree is this growing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's been a great presentation. We appreciate you all coming. Oh,
I do have
Alderman
another-
Jettie?
So of everybody, are you comfortable with the codes that you're charged with enforcing regarding housing, building? Is there any need for this committee to look into those or changing those, improving them, updating them?
I can, Sarah Marchant, I will just go out and say that we do support implementation at the state level of the updated building code. Right now, the state of New Hampshire is still using the 2009 building codes. There are so many new technologies and improvements in the new building codes. So they come out every 3 years. So there's the 2012, 2015, and 2018's coming, and we're still using 2009. And so as far as a larger code adoption, we very much would support, and we think that there's a huge savings overall in being able to use these new technologies and not trying to constantly submit alternatives for approvals for technologies that aren't included. We need to adopt the suite of codes together, but we would be very supportive of adopting the 2015 codes or a newer set of overall building codes.
Is that something like a state representative would bring forth?
There's generally a bill every year for that, and it's been a difficult road. But it is something that we feel is very important.
It's a great question, Alderman Jettie. You have another?
Is that something that we could implement locally? Do we have to wait for the state to do that, or can the city adopt a more updated code?
We do have the authority to adopt the more updated code in some respects. You do run into problems where there are differences and as to what supersedes what and when we can require things that are not in the state building code. So sometimes it leads to discussions over which applies if you're not using the same one. But it's within the authority of the municipality to adopt the more recent versions for use in the municipality.
So is that something you'd be requesting?
We would be hesitant to do that. The contractors who work here, who we work with every day, they work in every community around here, and so it's one standard system. You know, we can say this is not a standard that anybody else is holding you to. Everybody has to work in the same system, and there's a lot of benefit to that, to having the same comprehensive codes. It would be best if the state was to adopt those codes. There will come a time that there are other factors that might make Nashua want to go out on our own. For example, our flood insurance. If we get any further out of code compliance, the improvements that we've gotten in our CRM rating will go away. There might be factors that come around when we get so far out of compliance with the international codes that might make it more of an advantage to Nashua to do that. But at this time, your support at the state level, I think, would be the best thing.
Pops?
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Director Marchand, you said that the ticketing program is working.
Yes.
Can you tell us how that has happened? Were there many of them at the beginning, and you're seeing fewer?
We haven't seen a ton of them overall. We don't have to use them that frequently, and these guys are the ones issuing the tickets, so cut me off or jump in if necessary. We don't use, but it has helped with our repeat offenders, right? It's never been a lot of people who we've had trouble with. Generally, people are good and everybody wants compliance, right? There's a small number of people who are very difficult to work with and who then use an inordinate amount of city resources, time, skills. And so these are the people that we focused our tickets on. They start at one level, and if you don't pay them within 10 days, they add $50 on. And with multiple offenses, they get more expensive each time. And we have seen that bringing people around who in the past would have dragged things out, used a lot of resources, gotten to court, done some more, gone back and forth. And so the ticketing ordinance has been effective with that, I do think. And so we don't use it very often. But I think it really has made a big difference, but certainly open it up to you guys.
If I could just put some context in for the public that's watching, the ticketing system is relatively new, and it was what was originally vetted by the original
committee.
form of this committee.
Yes.
And it was because, as Director Marchand said, before the ticketing system, the city has always had a history of being very cooperative with landlords, but it didn't really have a recourse when you had a landlord that did not want to cooperate other than taking them to court. And more often than not, they could provide a list of repairs that were necessary, file for a court proceeding, and then a few days before the court proceeding, the landlord would finally fix everything, making the whole exercise pointless. So it was wasting a lot of city time and energy. It was allowing landlords to utilize a system in a way it was not intended to, whereas the ticket is more of an incremental consequence that does not need to be applied all at once. So it doesn't need to be an all or nothing. We need to go to court gambit. It could just be okay, well, we can work on the process with the code enforcement department. If we decide that we don't want to comply in this time frame that we're allowed, we know we're going to get a fine. We know what the consequence is going to be. Mm-hmm. So that's the ticketing system that's being referred to. All right, any other hands up that I don't see? Got a bell over there, Alderman Laws? All right, well, thank you all for coming. I appreciate your time. So I think we can close that. We don't have any other business before us, and I don't see any members of the public present. So we can do remarks by any members of the Board of Aldermen. There do not seem to be any. All right, then I guess I could take a movement to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? Do we need a second? All right, okay, then we're adjourned at 7:55.